Welcome to the Growing Up Bananas podcast, where we dissect the perks and tribulations of being bananas.
It's hard being yellow when I feel so white.
My name is Ethan. Alex is sitting next to me, and in many ways, I'm sitting next to her. What do you have in store today for us?
So today we're lucky enough to be joined by my brother-in-law, your eldest brother, Daniel. The chat was quite long, but an insightful one. So let's get straight into it.
A quick shout out to all our guests. Really, thanks for coming on so far. We really appreciate that. In terms of the episodes, a little bit of feedback. Obviously, they are quite long, so watch on 1.5 times speed on either watching on YouTube or on listening on Spotify. And don't feel that you have to watch it all in one sitting. It can definitely be split up. But other than that, let's get into it and appreciate all the support so far. Thank you. So we're lucky enough today to be joined by my eldest brother Daniel. Daniel is 4 years older than me, and like many young Australians, he's currently calling London his home. Daniel has been mentioned quite a few times in this podcast, so it's good to actually get him here and see him in person. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me. I like that you still refer to me as a young person.
Young mentally, obviously. So, like I said, we've spoken about you quite a few times. From your perspective, when did you actually first notice race?
I was thinking about this. I think it's always been there. I don't think there's any sort of moment where you're like, where you have an experience and that suddenly you're like, race is a thing. I think growing up in South Africa, having a Chinese family, it was always drummed into us from quite a young age that, we're Chinese, we're not necessarily the same as everyone else. So in some ways, when, being reprimanded, act in a certain way or don't act in a certain way because you're Chinese, or certain things are no-goes because of the fact that it doesn't fit within sort of being Chinese.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any one moment.
But it would have been quite early on, right?
Yeah,
Same as what
yeah.
I experienced. Yeah. Because we were talking about it the other night, and it was always, whether it was, by function, but everything was labeled. It's
Yeah.
he is a black man or he's a white man. And that's how we grew up. And that's probably why we were really race conscious. Obviously, racially charged country and all the history there.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, we were talking the other night. Like, I go out of my way now to try and describe people with anything but their race. So
Yeah.
it'd be like what they were wearing, or what their hair color might have been, or which side of the Zoom screen they were sitting on. But I will refuse to kind of say it is the Indian lady in the call. When and sometimes it might actually be a lot easier.
Well, I think it would be most time, especially if there are like a minority in the
Yeah.
in the group. I see your life in 4 stages.
Mhm.
So the first one is obviously growing up in South Africa. The next stage would be when we came to Australia. So you came in, you would have been grade 10, right?
Yes, I was 15.
So you did most of your high school, or you, I suppose your senior schooling in Mackay. The third stage is obviously when you moved down to Brisbane for university, and now the last stage is yourself in London. So we'll kind of go through those stages. Some we'll touch on more than others. But I guess let's start at the beginning. So our childhood. Again, we spoke about this the other day where I felt like I wanted to be white a lot of times growing up.
hmm
What were your experiences going to a predominantly white and Afrikaans school?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that you say that, because I don't think I ever necessarily wanted to be white, but I also think I was quite lucky at school because, like you say, the class was majority white or mixed race, or other, like, whether it be black, or there were some Chinese there as well. But like, I always felt like I fitted in. Like, yes, I was different, but it wasn't a big issue for my peer group.
Yep.
I think maybe the things that I might have wished be when I was younger is I wish that I had the same like restrictions or rules that my friends had, but not necessarily myself wanting to be different.
Did you, in terms of restrictions, was it too tight on mom and dad's side, or was it more lenient than what you were seeing?
I think in some ways it was tighter. Like it's the classic Asian rule. There are no sleepovers.
Yep.
You've got to be home by dinner time. Um, Whereas I think some of my friends, it was probably a bit more relaxed for them.
But do you think it's a race thing, or is it more like your parents being protective? Because, again, South Africa, crime rate's pretty high. They don't know where you're, like, I don't know. That
Yeah, but then weirdly, but we could kind of wander around the neighborhood through the day. Like we'd be in other people's backyards.
Yeah.
We'd honestly be like homeless kids running around the neighborhood, but not just us, like everyone that we went to school with.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was an overprotective thing because I mean so my cousin had a shop down the road and they're two big roads to cross to get to there, but we would just go there, buy sweets, buy lollies,
Yeah.
come back. So I think in some ways mum and dad were very relaxed, but in other ways there were certain rules that you couldn't really break.
So then how old were you guys, though, when you guys were walking down to the shop? Like, just
Primary
so...
school?
Primary school? Okay.
Yeah. So
I left when I was 10, so I would have been 7, 8.
Yeah. I used to ride to school when I was in grade 3 onwards. I don't
Yeah.
think we got picked up that much actually
Yeah,
when we were in Cape Town.
yeah, you're right. I mean, it was like a 5-minute walk. but-
Yeah, but it was also very different because like the school would finish and like 1,500 kids would just like descend on the street. Like they'd be walking in all directions.
So there's a lot of people everywhere, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember with like a common phrase that mum and dad would always use is it's the right thing to do, and a lot of times where we're like, why are we doing this? Do we have to do this? It's the right thing. So, like you say, I think to your question, I don't know if it was a race thing, or a cultural thing, but it was quite inconsistent. I think.
Yeah, but I think it's just the rules that they had in their mind, and that's fine. Because I think even like we were quite close with my cousin, who's only a year older than us, and we'd see him, but everyone would always generally go home. Only when I think we got older, when maybe end of primary school, early high school, we'd have sleepovers and the like.
Yeah.
Still didn't get to experience that, but that's all good.
Yeah. Don't want to jump too much into the future, but yeah, and then obviously things changed quite a lot when we came to Australia. So that's a different story in itself. So speaking of cousins, we're obviously from a very large, immediate family. What were your experience? What did you see growing up around that group in South Africa?
Yeah, I really loved it. I think it was such a good way to grow up, and also I think in hindsight, I think there was a lot of good life lessons because my mum's one of 9 children. Ethan and Mark have like 23 first cousins or something, but then they all range in age from pretty much just older than us to my mom's age. So what that means though is that, and then it was quite a close family at that time, so that you would, every weekend you'd be at families' houses or birthdays or whatever, or you'd go hiking, walking, whatever it might be with like a whole pack. But I think reflecting on it now as an adult, I think it's made me particularly, because you were quite young, Ethan, but
Yeah.
I'm quite sociable and I can talk to people of varying ages, and like I'm just comfortable being in big groups, and yeah, just like able to talk to babies but also to older people. Whereas I have some friends who had smaller families, and I was like, actually that kind of makes sense. If you have a smaller family, you're not exposed to that wider range of everyone.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point because obviously, yeah, like when we were there, we had younger cousins who were babies. Our older cousins, like how old is? I don't want to mention names or anything, but our oldest cousin, she's probably 20 years older than you.
Yeah, so she's older than our mum.
Yeah. So, and that's first cousins.
Yeah.
Mum's sister's daughter. So.
And your mum's niece, like one of her nieces is like 10 years younger than her.
Yeah,
as
but there's
well.
also one that's like 3 years older.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Asian family trees. It's always you got to map it out and draw it out, otherwise you don't understand. Don't even get started on your family.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was kind of thinking about the other day is at the end when we sort of were leaving. So you're in high school. How did you, or was it even a factor of balancing up? Because obviously there's family everywhere, there's parties, someone's birthday every week. Balancing spending time with the family versus branching out and not spending time with the family, so doing things with friends and building that side of your life.
Mm. I think that was because it was weird in some ways because although you were free during the day, at night you couldn't, so you were very reliant on your parents.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of had to work with what your parents' schedule were. Like you say, if there's a lot of family parties, and it's a lot of, trying to work it out. But I think the balance was always there. Like I'd kind of get dropped off before maybe you went to a family dinner and then picked up when it suited them. So sometimes it was actually really annoying because sometimes you get picked up from like a party at like 8 p.m. and you're like, it hasn't even started. But actually, when you're, what, 14, 13, 14, it's probably not the right time to go home.
Because I remember there's also the last year or two, like you used to go to movies, used to go to shops and stuff, and then Mark and I would kind of be dumped there at a party or a gathering, and we're like, why is Daniel not here? And but like you say, you're young and
yeah.
just
So
kind
I
of just
think
go with what's given to you.
I think at that time it was quite, there was a lot of independence, and I have been very lucky that mum and dad did give me, they trusted, not do too many stupid things. But yeah, I never actually thought about that I'd go do things on the weekends.
It was only the last little bit, last maybe year or two before we left.
Yeah.
One other thing that's just come to my mind about having that family is there's obviously a hierarchy in terms of respect for cousins, aunties, uncles, and it made you, and Alex, you can probably attest to this, it made you really value, titles and things like that. You didn't have that larger family, you're not going to know. Is there anything you saw in regards to that?
Yeah, I think it's really nice because when we go back to South Africa, we can fall into, our place in the pecking order.
Yep.
But I think it was also really freeing coming to Australia that we kind of got to get away from that, because if you think about it, Ethan, you were always going to be the youngest cousin. Mark would be second youngest. I would be like you know what I mean? Like we were like the bottom of the food chain.
Yep.
Whereas we came to Australia, it was just the five of us, and suddenly there is no pecking order. It's for us to decide and make what we want of it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a really good pickup. And then I guess on your side, Alex, as well, you've learnt a lot in terms of culture from pecking orders, and everyone has a title. You got to call them by their title. Probably made us, I don't want to say more respectful. That's definitely not what I'm trying to say, but it makes us more.
Well, there's a filial duty to your elders. You
yes.
take care of your elders. And that's, well, filial duty's Chinese. It stems from China. So that's part of our culture. But just talking about culture, having gone to South Africa a few times, what I noticed is your family being Chinese. There's a lot that you guys do that I look at you guys, I'm like, oh, you guys look like a Chinese family, right? Because you guys play mahjong. That to me is really cultural.
We eat
And
rice.
you guys eat
wontons.
rice, and of course the whole food gathering.
Mm.
But would you guys say that you had a traditional Chinese upbringing? Because, for example, Lunar New Year's coming up, but having spoken to Ethan, he was like, that's something that you guys never did. You guys didn't go to each other's houses. You guys didn't do the red pockets at New Year's, but you do it for birthdays and weddings, like the whole tea ceremony thing. But is there anything that you find, okay, actually we did grow up in a traditional Chinese household, other than maybe the decorations that are in the houses that everyone has, like, all the Chinese writing on the wall that no one can read, but is there anything? Yeah, is there anything that stands
I think in
out?
some ways it's very traditional, but then not, as you sort of picked up. Because even Chinese New Year, we wouldn't go around to people's houses, but there would be a massive gathering at like the Chinese community center where all the Chinese would go, and then the kids would get the red pockets that way, and it'd be a massive like Chinese like meal put out. So, but yeah, Chinese New Year wasn't that big. Mid Autumn Festival not that big for. Is it Mid Autumn? Yeah, Mid Autumn. Yeah.
And then
Mooncakes,
even if you go and you talk about funerals and things like that, I think the family struggled really hard to try and remember or adhere to the actual processes, cultural. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It is pretty very mixed bag.
Yeah, because when we go back as well, like we go to the cemetery,
Yeah.
and they on the anniversaries, your family will go out, and like that's I think is well in a way is traditional Asian.
Mm.
Is yeah,
Yeah.
very
Well, we go every year, lay out the flowers, you clean it, flowers, pray. Where depending, it doesn't matter what religion you are. That's kind of the same thing. Like you make that offering.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just think it's interesting because your parents are first generation South African
Mm.
as well. So I also find,
second, but yeah.
oh sorry, second. That's right, second. And I do find that they're quite westernized,
Mm.
but then also can be quite Asian. So
Yeah.
I guess to me, it's really interesting to hear.
Yeah. I think it's a mixed bag. I
Yeah.
think, there's some things that might have been important to their parents or their parents' parents, like you say, the going to the cemetery, um, meeting up for special occasions, and that were, and then those traditions hold firm. But you got to remember that, like, our family, a lot of the people, like local Chinese South Africans who've been there for generations, they barely speak Chinese. They can't read anymore, so they've got no contact with, it could be with the greater Chinese region, whether it be Hong Kong, Taiwan, mainland China. So all that they're taking culturally is what they remember or their shared experience, because they won't be able to communicate or understand what's going on within greater China.
Yeah, and it's handy that you guys all have your Chinese names on your arms and legs, but you can't even.
Forget.
Return me if lost.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel sorry for our kids because they don't even know
I
what
don't
their
even know what
names
their
are.
names are.
Like,
Mm.
so I think, yeah, that's a bit, I don't know, it's sad, but then also good, like moving on with the times, right?
Mm.
So staying in our South African upbringing that time, what were your fondest memories growing up? And I'll give mine first. It was usually playing in the backyard,
Mm.
doing things like that. Um, Playing balloon ball, a game that Daniel invented and had rules for. So
Strict
just
rules.
just really quickly, we couldn't just play games with Daniel. We had to have a round robin schedule and knockout. All the rules had to be done. Everything had to be measured. So Daniel does enjoy planning.
Yeah.
So what were your fond memories of
I
that time?
think I think the same as you, playing in the backyard. We used to have like a jungle gym set. So sometimes it'd be a circus tent.
Yep.
Sometimes it would be, there was a slide that went into the pool that was quite good. So yeah, backyard pool. But then also there was like kind of like a rumpus room upstairs. And because it was away from the rest of the house, we could make an absolute mess there and we wouldn't have to clean it up. So we'd rearrange the furniture, build forts. Sometimes we would uh, set it out like for as movie theater. So I think that was also quite good up in the top.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that. Yeah, that room we got up to a lot of good times in there.
And maybe not a fond memory, but a memory I remember of you is you and a damn cricket ball and bat up against the wall all day, every day, just thud, thud, hit, thud, thud, hit. And
That
I'd
was
be
an
like,
easy
Ethan,
hit to
can you
take.
please stop? And then you with a sock, the cricket ball and the sock.
Gotta knock my bat in. Had to knock the bat in myself. So yeah, no, that's definitely a big part of it. I guess staying on memories and early times in terms of interest. So Mark
Mm.
and I were quite into sport, probably from Dad's influence. You
Mm.
slightly less so. I remember you would read books about airports and you'd study the world map and things like that.
Mm.
At that age, what did you want to do, or what did you want to be when you were older? Did you have any idea?
Well, I think I wanted to go to the top. I wanted to own an airline. I don't know where that came from. I think I loved
You
planes.
always did, yeah.
I liked travel and the idea of it, and yeah, it just fascinated me. But and then I think more realistically, an architect was probably what I wanted to be at that time.
How old were you?
Primary school.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. Mark and I were throwing mud at each other, and Daniel would be inside reading something.
Not about planes or town planning, like
No, literally,
buildings.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when it came to Sim City, that's where you really found
yeah,
hit your strides.
Thank you, SimCity.
yeah.
Yeah, so another fond memory for me, and only in hindsight, because at the time I absolutely hated it, but it was Chinese school, so
Yeah.
Chinese language school on the weekend. Alex and I sort of spoke about our experiences in a previous episode, but from your side, take us through what you saw.
I I think I've always, like you said, I was at home like I'd be reading or looking up something. So I think I've always been quite inquisitive. and keen to learn. So for me, I thought I actually always enjoyed Chinese school. Yeah, it was a bit tedious that it would be on Saturday morning, it's every Saturday morning, but I think learning a new language, learning the characters and all of that, I found really interesting.
Okay.
The classes themselves were ridiculous. They were so hilarious. It was a range of like toddlers to sort of early primary school, and then there were some high school students who were doing it for extra credit, and then it was our mum and our aunt who were actually the two most disruptive in the class.
Yep.
They treated it like the teachers and the students. It was meant to be treated as a proper school. So you're meant to be well behaved. You're meant to listen, not meant to drink or eat. Our aunt would just open up packets of sweets and chips and offer it around to the class. But because she was what, like 50 or 60 at that time, the teacher
Yeah.
like couldn't be like, sorry.
Poor teacher, yeah, it's just like
She's just like, I give up. This is a circus.
And then comes time for a roll call, where none of us, including our auntie and mum, really knew our names. Yeah, that was absolutely even added to the circus.
Yeah. All I remember is it being fun, but yeah, a circus.
Do you remember any of the Chinese that you would have learned? I mean, because you did Chinese later, but do you remember anything that you learned?
Yeah, I remembered really useless sentences. There was the one about the it's the
You're gonna
about
have to go.
but I can't even. It was something about like the
So you don't
grandmother
remember.
reading the grandfather reading the newspaper, the grandmother liking to cook or something, like things that wouldn't really be useful in life.
Yep. I took very little from it. I also was about 6 or 7 at the time. So.
But you're just copying off your mum.
Well, the teacher used to do a lot of my work for me. I was so young, so yeah. But yeah, Chinese school. It's for everyone we've had and spoken to on the podcast, they've got really mixed, usually bad experiences from it. So I was saying to Alex, potentially now with internet, YouTube, possibly even being able to hire someone who could actually come and tutor, I think we'll definitely have a go with our kids.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I mean, hopefully they learn more than what I did in my 3 or 4 classes that I would have done before we left. And it was like, I still can't even pronounce dad properly in Chinese. I'm like, because I get confused between the Chinese and Vietnamese. Because in Vietnamese, it's ba. And then like in Chinese, like ba or
Off
something.
tone,
Or,
yeah.
yeah.
So
It's like a drop, like
yeah.
ba. Like, I don't know. They just, yeah. But it'd be nice.
I mean, you guys could do it as a family.
That's what I'm thinking.
You're probably at the same level as Olivia and Charlie, so
possibly even less.
Yeah.
So let's then move on to the next phase of your life. So we come to Australia 2003. You're a young man at this stage, coming into your own. I was 11, you were 15. What were your feelings or your expectations like before we actually came over?
Well, I don't know if you've talked about this before, but we actually spent 6 months in Australia 4 years before. So I think expectations wise, we kind of knew what was happening, like what to expect, what the schools and the life would be like. So I was really excited because I think that 6 months that we did was a really fun time. And maybe it was because all three of us were in primary school and we're kind of at the right age where you can explore. And I remember it was like a lot of fishing, a lot of
Yeah, no, we did a
Each
lot,
time,
and actually surprised I haven't spoken about this, but yeah, so we did the 6 months in 99. Felt like ages, and it was only 6 months in hindsight.
And all I remember is from the 99 bit was the amount of suitcases for a 6 month stint. I think the 5 of us had like 10 suitcases and 5 boxes. I don't know how mum and
Yeah, you
dad
had
got
those
that onto
hard,
the airline.
those hard, heavy
Yeah.
cases too. Hey?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, so your question was about 2003 and
Yep.
moving back. So I knew what to expect. I was really excited. I think at that point, I mean, I always get I think I get itchy feet like every 5 years, even as a kid. So I like either wanted to change schools or I wanted to change cities. So I was kind of ready for the change at that point. So I think I was probably with dad, the two that were really pushing for it.
Yep. I guess putting myself in your shoes, because again, I was 11. You just started high school the year we left. Were you worried about the fact that, okay, I've really got to uproot myself, don't really know how it's all going to pan out in terms of school and further study, or you were just, like I said, you're just excited
Yeah.
to make the move and see what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever been one of those people that's apprehensive about a move or a change. So I think maybe the mindset as 15-year-old me was like, it's an opportunity to make new friends, to
Yep.
move to a new city, to be in a new house. So yeah, maybe I've got issues that I don't like being too rooted.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, like, you still hang out with some of the friends you made in '99,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, even Jay and Jesse coming over the other day,
Yeah.
like for Christmas, known them for
Yeah.
20, 24, 23, 24 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah. And I think those friends you don't necessarily keep in contact all the time. You might actually only talk once or twice a year or when I'm back in town. But the nicest thing is that it doesn't really change.
Yeah.
And I guess they've known you for so long. You don't have to explain yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big one, because like we had Coda on the podcast earlier, and he, fortunately or unfortunately, he moved up like sort of 6 countries by the age of
Mm.
14, and every time he had to reset, explain himself. You don't have those memories to fall back on. Whereas, I guess fortunately, we had that experience in '99, and then
Mm.
you've managed to stay friends with some of those guys, which
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah.
So in terms of friends, like I always had sport to fall back on. So all my friends would usually be guys I'd either play hockey or cricket or soccer with. For you, how did what was your kind of your go to when meeting new people? Again, fortunately, you had a couple of people you knew
Yeah.
from the first trip. What do you usually do? Or back then, what was your way to socialize?
I think for me, it's just interesting people. People that are, interesting, that aren't, like, I think as a kid, like, aren't mean or something, So it's just like,
Nice
are they
people.
funny? Are they
Yeah,
hilarious in class? Like, you don't want, like, you didn't want to be friends with someone that was going to drag you down necessarily, but are they entertaining? I don't think it's not necessarily like, oh, there was sport that drew us together. And if I always look at my friends, it's quite a mix.
Yeah,
I don't think you could say there's a common thread. It's probably more just like, oh, I thought they were hilarious, or they were interesting to talk to, or they'd get on well within my wider group of friends, and then you can bring them in.
yeah,
So funny that you say that, because for me it was like the studious kids. Like,
Ah,
even it doesn't even matter like what race they were, because
yeah,
I went to a school where it was like in primary school it was just predominantly mixed,
mm,
but not in terms of Asians, but like there was a lot of whites, a lot of indigenous, and um a lot of islanders. But for me it was the studious kids, and I don't even know if that's because it's something that I don't think it's something that my parents expected, but it was just more for me like that was what I was interested in. I wanted to do well in school. So of course I'm going to hang out with the kids who were more studious, and if anything I kind of liked the competition. I don't
mm,
know. And my parents aren't about competition either. I think it was just something that, like I wanted to perform well. So if I want to perform well, it's like, keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I don't know.
Flex.
I don't know.
Interesting mindset.
I didn't know. No, that wasn't my actual mindset. But I just mean, like they just like-minded people. So I think I more gravitated towards them, and that's probably why I wasn't very fit as a kid. Like I could run.
Mm,
I say run, but I'd always blame my asthma whenever it came to people like, why don't you play sport? I'm like, oh, asthma. But really, it's because I was too busy, like always. Since I was in primary school, I'd just
practicing
be
things.
in the, yeah, like, I'd be in the library reading, or, like, but I was never, out with the kids playing sports or dancing and things like that, or drama.
not
Kids.
playing sport,
No, not playing sports. So
because
it was,
who you are.
yeah.
I think I've always been friendly enough with most people.
Yeah.
But my close friends are those that I think, I don't want to say bring something to the table, but it's like, are they easy to talk to? Are they entertaining? Doesn't matter if we even don't have the same interests, because don't necessarily need to talk about sport or World of Warcraft all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that side, because spoken about it a lot. That's really the main commonality that I usually
Mm,
have with people is, do they enjoy sport? Do they watch sport? Do they? You know, that's where I get most of my connections from. Um, we've spoken to other people, and a lot of them usually gravitate towards Asians
mm,
when they come to a new country, or if they just go to a gathering, they do that.
mm,
I found myself especially early on, would gravitate away from Asians.
Yeah.
We sort of spoke about it the other night. Can you talk about any of that and
Yeah.
potentially how that come? And I guess we're going back to the South African
Mm.
roots and ties.
Yeah. I think if I look at like sort of the order over my life, probably when I was younger, I would say I gravitated away from Asians, and I'll sort of come into why that's happened. Then I think for a while, maybe I gravitated more too, but I think there's different thought processes. So when we were in primary school, like I said, we were local Chinese South Africans, but there were a couple of foreign, like yeah, Chinese that were ethnically Chinese that weren't necessarily from they were their family
Fresh
didn't
off the
from
boat
Peking. Yeah, it could be
in the
Hong
nicest
Kong,
way.
Taiwan, or China, but they didn't really speak English properly.
Yeah.
Actually, I think they couldn't. A lot of them because they came quite young, like they literally had arrived and then couldn't speak English, so they had to go to English remedial classes.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was always like kind of distancing myself subconsciously from them so that my wider friend group would be like, he's not part of them. But also we literally couldn't speak to each other until like they were 3 or 4 years down the line when they'd gone to English school. So I think because of that experience, I probably gravitated away from Asians naturally.
Yeah.
Then probably in like university and the like, there was maybe I was a bit interested in Asian culture coming to Brisbane. So I wouldn't say I like gravitated towards Asians, but I was always interested to understand different life experiences.
Open to how they're living and their experiences. Yeah, I guess I'm quite similar as well in that sense in terms of like when I was younger, growing up, like we were the token Asians. But then I think I mentioned this like on my podcast, like when I went to a school that was like predominantly Asian, like that's when I was like, ugh, like I don't want to be with them because you're right. Like when you go to school and you're the local Asian and then you've got your like Asians who've just come to Australia, you don't want to be associated with them because you kind of just think like, well, I'm not like them. I'm like you guys.
You speak English. I've been
And
there
I
my whole
can
life.
speak English, and you don't want to be associated as like, oh, they can't speak English, and I don't know why. Like, I say that was them, but I still do that now, and I don't, not because I'm being rude, but it's just, and not because I think that I'm better than them, but it's just my mindset, right? That I'm just like, oh no, I'm like, I don't know, it's weird.
I think, when you're talking about that, I was actually thinking, in primary school, I think there was a point where almost like it was a bit of pride in that you're like, I'm local. Like you said, I'm local. And so I'm not necessarily exactly the same as the rest of my classes, but like you're a little bit unique. Like you've got that like a little bit of both.
The edge.
Yeah. Like you're local, but you're still Asian. So you could be friends with them if you wanted to, but you kind of choose like it doesn't really quite work. But I think now, as I've gotten older, I still probably gravitate more to. I'd even say more Australians because I live in London. But if I do see, someone like an Asian or just anyone who really like is struggling to fit in, I do make a conscious effort to try and get them involved. So that's where I was saying that there's a little bit of a change now.
Yeah.
This might be slightly controversial, but you look at the Chinese South African community, there was always a very big, we were here first, and these are the overseas Chinese or from Hong Kong. And I think now talking through this, and I really like the way you articulated that, thinking of at school we're here and I don't really need them. I'm kind of my own Chinese. I think that in the back of our minds definitely played some role. The fact that we're the the South African Chinese and they're the Hong Kong Chinese or
whatever they may be. But I also think in South Africa in particular, they have a bad rap, whether it's true or not. But
there's a bad rap everywhere.
No, but I think South Africa is particularly bad. It'll be the drug trades, the like modern slavery, the shark fin, all of that sort of stuff is that stigma that sits with the more recent immigrants. So you want to step away from them, be like, no, we're legit. We aren't part of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yep,
And I think there's definitely a crossover for in Australia as well, where a lot of the
definitely.
immigrants, unfortunately, that's how they have to get by is through doing different activities. They didn't get to go to university, didn't get to go to school here, so
Yeah,
they
but
had
then
to
you got the
find other
cohorts
ways.
as well, I guess, who are the university students that they they probably, the parents are sending them over. They're spending quite a lot of money
Yeah,
to be in Australia. So I think there's almost like two camps, right? Or like two different identities that Asians in
yeah,
Australia might actually have.
yeah. No, I 100% agree with that.
But when you're talking about the whole stigma against like Asians coming over, like with the Chinese in South Africa, I'm like, we get that here as well, though.
Mm,
Like even in Brisbane, like if we in the Vietnamese, as soon as you say you're Vietnamese, people are like, you must know someone who's into drugs or a drug dealer. And I'm like,
It's usually
no,
true, isn't it?
I literally do not know anyone. I'm like, I know like legal like drug dealers, like pharmacists, which, like that's literally all I know.
You've got a dealer.
And then
They
like
just work at a pharmacy.
but I think that's also why my parents live in the suburb that they live in, where it's not like it's still
Mm.
Asian. It's still Asian, but it's not, let's say, the Vietnamese community because there's a stigma around the Vietnamese community, how they talk, how they dress, and the way that they are. So I think, how you guys mentioned, like, there's a stigma of what in South Africa, like what the Chinese were like. I'm like, I guess it happens a bit, like, it happens everywhere.
It's a
Yeah,
shame though, isn't it? Because, a few bad eggs kind of cloud the entire group.
yeah. No. Just to pick up the timeline again. So at that time, like I said, you're a young man coming into your own. I personally felt that you maybe consciously or unconsciously distance yourself from Mark and myself. In hindsight, now thinking back from it, was it just because there's 4 year age gap between us and we were probably very different maturity to you at that time,
Yeah.
or was it something that maybe we made up in our heads?
Um, it's interesting you bring it up because I feel like you've never ever told me this.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a bad thing. Like
I
I
think,
was, I was involved with sport
yeah.
and things, and it kind of just
I mean,
it
let's
was
put,
just
like, so
something.
I was 15, right?
Yeah,
You would have been 11, Mark would have been 12, 13. So maybe I wouldn't say it was conscious, but I think maybe compared to South Africa where we all play together, I was moving away from that. And you guys might have felt it as a pulling away when actually it was maybe just me growing up a little bit
Going
more.
through
So
puberty.
yeah, so what I will say to you now, what's it, 25 years later or what it is, with your childhood scars, is I didn't pull away from you.
like I said, it didn't. It really didn't affect me too much, but it was just something that we noticed. Like again, our interests were way different. We
Mm,
would like to play games, video games,
yeah,
sport, and things like that, and your interests were not that.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't stand video games. I don't have the attention span for it.
Yeah. One thing that we've always spoken about is that we have always been able to be chameleons
Mm,
in terms of we've got the South African, Chinese, Australian sides to us, and at certain times we can change our colors to suit our surroundings. Growing up in South Africa, Mackay, Brisbane, and now obviously in London, how does that actually work in your favor?
Oh, I think it's really useful. I think I flex on whichever, whether it be Chinese, South African, Aussie, depending on the situation. I think it makes it really easy. Like if I meet Asian people, I can understand the customs and the culture and the requirements for
Yeah.
that. Same with if I meet a South African, then I can just switch into Afrikaans. And then if it's an Aussie, then you just talk about like your Aussie experience. So it makes it really easy. But I think at this point, I probably naturally, if people ask me where are you from, I'd say Australia, and then go,
Yeah,
but born in South Africa with Chinese heritage. Actually, it was hilarious at passport control. I can't remember where I was going in or out of, but the guy had my passport. He looked at me. So it was an Aussie passport at that time. He like looked at me, looked at my place of birth, and he's like, Cape Town with an Aussie passport. I was like, yes, yes, just
Well,
the just the UN right here in one person.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely benefited us in a lot of ways. Myself working in client relations,
Mm,
you're gonna find different people from different places, and you have that to actually go to. I'm not just saying that I've been to South Africa. I lived there. I was
Mm,
born there. Live in Australia most
mm.
of my life. I do have the Chinese cultural heritage. So yeah, it's definitely been a positive in things that I do.
Yeah, and I find it comes in useful to explain to people who might not have the same uh that same level of exposure,
Yep.
like why some things are the way they are, or why you should or shouldn't do certain things.
So this next phase of your journey so far is when you moved from Mackay to Brisbane,
Mm,
mainly for university, and I'm sure to get away from mum and dad as well.
mm,
Um, we did live together for about 4 years,
yeah.
and in hindsight, I took it as a given that you would just be willing to live with me.
Mm.
Did you ever feel pressure to be the older brother and to do the right thing? So it's probably a two-part question, but first one, yeah, did you ever feel pressure to be the older brother? And secondly, us living together. We'll talk about that a little bit.
Um, Not pressure. I think it was a given, but I also um wasn't like unhappy with it. I was quite excited, like I've been here 4 years. My little baby brother's moving, so I can kind of help him settle in. Because I think when I moved to Brisbane, yes, I had friends here and stuff, but it was quite a big learning and growing experience. To organize a house yourself, to all those things that university students have to organize when they first move out of home. And granted that you're still 17 at that point, I can't imagine now. Like, I mean, can you imagine your kids 17 letting them go off to the world?
They will not be.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of faith to put in your children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, no, I wasn't. I was excited for you to move, and I don't think I was. I don't think I felt pressure. I think it was always a given that you were going to move, and you would move in with me. Like, and in my mind, I was like, where else would you go?
Yeah.
True.
But on that note, have you ever felt pressure as an older brother?
No.
Like to be like, oh, you have to look after, like, so your parents have never said, hey, Daniel, you're the older brother, you need to look after, you're like, Mark, you have to look after Daniel, because, sorry, not Daniel, Ethan,
Your
because
husband.
that's,
Yeah.
sorry.
The
No,
love of your
sorry.
life.
No, because, like, just because like, I think it's because I'm, like, being Vietnamese, my parents have always just been like, you're the eldest,
Mm.
and living in Brisbane, like you're the eldest cousin as well. So
Mm.
you have to, not pressure, but I was just always told you're the eldest. You have to look after all the young ones. So you never ever felt that from
I
your
don't. Well,
parents.
that's what I said. I think it was a given. It wasn't. It was didn't need to be said as such.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
So I think if I wasn't looking after or whatever, then it would be said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it like, Daniel, you're the oldest, you need to set the example.
Yeah.
And you've never had to, I suppose, be told that.
No.
In terms of us living together, I think
Mm.
we're going to cover this another time. But a lot of stuff I do kind of, I don't want to say regret, but I would change a few things just
Okay.
because I was 17, had no experience, I had no money, and you, I'd be a very different roommate or housemate now, I think, with things that I've seen and things that I've now done and experienced.
I mean, overall, would you say that you enjoyed that time?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And also, like, very, very grateful to you, mom and dad,
Mm.
because I didn't have to go through that whole setting myself up. I had all that. I really just had to focus on my sport and university
Yeah.
and just living, really. I didn't have to worry
Yeah.
about too much. So, very fortunate.
I'm interested to know what things you would change because I think, like for me, I really enjoyed that time. For some reason, I think it's longer than 4 years because
Was it?
I don't know. No, no. As in, like in my mind, I feel like it's longer than 4 years, but I really enjoyed it. So I'm interested to know what things you think that made you uh, a terrible housemate to live with because it
Yeah,
wasn't really that
I'm
bad.
also
I don't
curious.
think I was a terrible housemate, but look, I could have done more. I could have been more proactive in terms of helping out with dinners and cleaning and things like that. Just little things. But the main one is I would have tried to do more stuff with you. I think we didn't really do too much together. Obviously, I was busy. You were busy.
Mm.
You were studying. You just about graduated.
Working at McDonald's, which entailed like all day drinking once it was done.
Yeah, that's a given. So it's just things like that. And like, even the time when I lived with Mark
Mm.
for a couple of years, we hardly did a lot of stuff together. and I'm not sure why, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, you're probably right, but I feel like we did spend a lot of time together.
we did.
We didn't necessarily go on trips to the Gold Coast or go to dinners and stuff, but we spent a lot of time at DFO.
Well, I mean, like, I feel like I was also in the mix
Yeah.
whenever I'd come visit. Never stayed over, hey.
No, never.
Never
So
stayed
so
over.
we were married.
Yeah.
Um,
But no, I feel like we did do
No,
a
we
bit.
did.
Like
No,
we
like I
had our,
mean,
I think everyone had their own lives, but you guys are living together.
yeah.
So I wouldn't expect you guys to be like, let's go out and hang out and do more things,
Mm,
because you guys would have dinners together here and there, or like you would have your
mm,
friends over and you'd be like,
yeah.
hey, do you guys want to join us? So I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't regret that. I think it was probably enough.
Yeah, or maybe you guys did need to just do brotherly like trips here and there
Mm.
to like go overseas. But again, you were broke.
Yeah,
When
well,
you're
You're a
in,
broke
when
student.
realize Ethan had no
Broke
money.
uni
When you're in triple
student.
figures.
the bank account, it's not a hell of a lot you can do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but no, that's the main thing. Is yeah, I really do enjoy that time, and
Mm.
I do look back on it and area the fact that I was just out of home for the first time.
You know, I'm just remember we always used to have a key issue. One of us would lock ourselves
Yes.
out.
So
And
it's
there was
about
that one
time,
time, where was I that you decided the best way to get home is to scale a 3-story building?
and I did it way too many
Yeah, you've-
more times
You
after that.
you have, because even when we were together, like you did that, and I'm like, what the heck
I
is
think
this?
it's because we used to share the car, and
Ah.
then we didn't necessarily keep the key on the car keys.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, jeez, yeah, I don't know how I got through that. Yeah, then we're talking about Brisbane. So most of your friends, not childhood, but most of your friends at that time were white.
Mhm.
Whether you met them through McDonald's or other means. What are the main differences that you see in terms of hanging out with an Asian group or hanging out with an Australian group?
I don't know. I feel like the lines have blurred now because over time, my white friends have become more Asian, and my Asian friends have become whiter.
Yep.
In terms of like, no, like in
Oh,
terms
like-
of hanging out, and like
Ah,
it's a
okay.
bit of like a cultural mix. But I think maybe the one thing, and probably don't want to keep coming back to drinking, but I think drinking culture is different.
It is, and that's the main difference I see.
Yeah. Like when you drink with your Western or your local Aussie friends, they don't actually have to be just white, but
Yeah.
Culturally assimilated Aussie friends. They I think you drink to chat, whereas in Asian culture that's probably bubble tea, right?
Yes.
And when you're drinking, it's games, and you're like, why on earth are we drinking so that we're like falling apart? But then actually, I forget. Yeah, they are drinking. I think about like forkings and spoons and all
Yeah,
those.
but I feel like you did that
In
when
your
you were-
teenage years.
Yeah. I'm thinking, well, this is the Brisbane time, right?
Whereas
It was
the
early
Asians
20s.
only start
That's
drinking.
still, still a thing. So, friend of the show, Barbara,
Like-
she won't mind, but she enjoys playing the games
Yeah.
as opposed to just casually drinking. And
Whereas-
that's a big difference.
But just like talking about that though, she's only picked that up because she lived in Hong Kong, and that's a
Mm.
big thing in Hong Kong. Is like when they go to drink, it's not just they do long shifts, they do long hours. They need to let loose somehow, so they're gonna go and have fun. And to have fun, it's drinking, games, like getting everyone,
Karaoke.
yeah, karaokeing.
So that definitely is a big difference.
So it is a
between-
big cultural difference, yeah.
Yeah, whereas I think with the Aussie friends, it was more like you have a beer or you have a drink and you're unwinding and you
Yeah.
kind of decompress. Like, so yeah, I used to work at McDonald's and literally we it was pretty bad. So the first shift started at 6 in the morning, and then people would start finishing like 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11, and literally we'd just go to the pub upstairs, and as you finished work, you would just join. So like if you were the first ones to finish by
In
like
trouble.
6 p.m., it was a disaster. But those are the funnest times. Like my friends were over last night, and we were reflecting on our McDonald's experience and how on earth did we not get fired?
But also
You were
during
all like managers there, weren't you?
yeah, but
Oh,
also
yeah,
during
yeah.
that time, it's also different as well, because I feel like you guys would have experienced all your clubbing days and like like all your parties during your
Mm,
high schooling years, whereas like I feel like Asians don't really do a lot of the
Most of them are
house
still at home.
yeah,
mm,
house parties, like because yeah, we're living at home, not allowed to
And
do
there's no way you're having a house
sleepovers.
party at your parents' house if
Yeah,
you're
no
Asian.
no sleepovers. And so
mm,
like, you couldn't do that. So I think like there's a delay,
mm,
I guess, in terms of the drinking and
mm.
enjoying it and getting drunk. Like it's pretty much you're drinking to get drunk and it's not even drinking to be able to socialize and just
Yeah.
be really casual. So I guess there is a bit of a difference.
No, that's good. And then looking at that time in Brisbane, so this is the first time really in your life that you're around more Asians.
Mm,
Obviously, bigger city. We grew up in Mackay. We've
mm.
gone over the point that there were hardly any Asians, whether born there or immigrants. Did you find that you really enjoyed and you wanted to know more about the Asian culture? I know you studied Mandarin, Spanish as well, but Mandarin in particular. How did you find yourself, becoming a bit more less of a banana, let's say?
Yeah, I think it was being inquisitive at that point that, like we had grown up in a Western white society for so long. So it's like understanding, yeah, what are the Asians currently doing, and then kind of aligning it with those traditions. Like, have what our parents been saying? Is it really true with like the wider uh, Asian culture? Some of them are slightly different because you got to remember that the sort of the cultural heritage that our family have in South Africa is from the early 1900s, but the world does keeps changing. So
Yeah.
even like the way they speak is different. Some of the some of those sort of cultural things have changed as well. And also, I guess with less children now, you don't have massive families where everyone's got a different name, different aunts, uncles, cousins.
Yep. Yep. That's a good point. I think, yeah, just you talk to a few of the Chinese people that are here, and they've one cousin, sometimes not even a cousin. It's just them and their parents.
Yeah.
That's totally different to the upbringing that we had, where
Mm,
so much family.
yeah.
Yeah,
And everyone's got a name and a title.
yeah. Like we just can I can just relate to your family because again my family's just like that big as well. So it is I don't know, sad to see though that the numbers are just dwindling like
It's an affordability crisis, Alex.
yeah.
And then I don't want to embarrass you, but you got into Taiwanese dramas and the music and those
And
sorts of
got
things.
you into it as well. So I'm going down, you're going down with me.
Hey, I did. Um, did you feel like it was? I guess my question: how did you get into it? And then also,
Oh, yeah.
did you feel like this is a part of you that was like kind of
I can relate to
stagnant or
this. Oh yeah.
was born?
So I think the way I got into it was, like you said, I studied Mandarin at UQ amongst other things.
Yep.
And then there used to be like a media room in the
UQ.
in the like the school,
Okay.
and so they used to have like Taiwanese dramas and stuff. So kind of watched it with like subtitles. But to be honest, I actually really watched it just to understand how Chinese is actually spoken.
Yep.
I think for me it was always still very foreign. I mean, the storylines are ridiculous, and the whole context isn't anything that we can understand. So I think I wouldn't be able to say, "Oh yeah, I watched it and suddenly I found my place."
Yeah.
This is what I've been missing my whole life.
This is me. This
Yeah,
is my life.
yeah, no.
See, I kind of felt that way, not because I was like, this is amazing and it's a part of me. It was just something that we'd never experienced. Like, we
Uh,
never listened to
yeah.
Chinese music. We never watched the shows.
Mm.
And I was like, this is actually pretty cool.
So is it because like how they look? You're like that guy look.
Oh,
That could be me. I could be on. Yeah, you
Representation.
I think a lot of it was that, to be honest.
the hair. That could be my hair. I can
Yeah,
do
we
that.
had a stupid like short back and sides our whole lives, and
You know what? I think I felt that more with Crazy Rich Asians. Not to say that my lived experience is anything like Crazy Rich Asians, but as in because the way they were portrayed on TV was a bit of a mix of both.
Yep.
So I think when you're talking about did I sync with or see myself being represented on TV, it might have been more Crazy Rich Asians.
okay,
Actually, even Joy Luck Club. Although it's a
not a happy movie.
no,
That one.
yeah,
Still
yeah.
yet to watch that.
Oh,
Yeah.
At
if
any
you watch
rate,
it.
yeah.
No, that's really good, and it's good to get a bit of context around how you became less of a banana over that period.
Mm.
Jumping forward a fraction, so obviously you graduate, your career's on a pretty good, strong upwards trajectory. Then you decide to uproot yourself and go to London. What were the main motivations behind that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always wanted to go to London. So originally, I wanted to go straight after high school.
Yeah.
But then I needed to stay in the country to get citizenship and so that didn't happen. And then I was like, all right, I'll go when I graduate. But my manager at the time had said, don't go as a graduate. It's going to be hard to get a job. So stay in Australia, get a couple of years experience, and then it'll be easier for you to get a decent job.
Great
And
advice.
Oh, yeah, it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I'd highly recommend that to anyone. Please don't go poor pints. You won't be able to afford London. Um, so that was it. And then I think at the time, the visa, there was an age restriction on it. It was 20. You had to get it or land before you were 28. So really, I'd kind of been putting it off. And so if I didn't go when I went, I probably would never have gone.
Yep.
So yeah, it's always been in the back of my mind. Like since I was a child, I've always said I wanted to go live in London. I wanted to travel Europe.
Was it London in particular? I guess it's English speaking, and
Yeah, yeah,
everyone-
English speaking.
most Aussies go there, and it's
Yeah.
very similar culturally to Australia.
And don't you guys also have like family friends, and then you would have had
Yeah.
cousins? It seems like
Like
some of
everyone-
your
everyone knows
cousins.
someone in
Yeah.
London.
Well, your cousins also went there, and
Yep.
Yeah.
so then
Yeah.
it would
Yeah,
make sense.
exactly. And they were family friends. I mean, not they were, they are family friends. A lot of my friends had moved there. So it made sense to go at that time. So I know you were saying to me a couple of days ago that it felt very quick
It
when
did.
but I think it was also because I had just had to go if otherwise I wasn't going to.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I went in August and I probably wouldn't have been able to go by the next Feb. And it's like, when's a good time? No, it's never a good time. And then my friends were getting married in June or July. So I had to stay, well, not had to, but I chose to stay in Australia for their wedding. And then I was like, I'll move after that. Because otherwise I probably would have gone at the beginning of 2016.
And that all makes a lot more sense now. Obviously you're not here, so you're living in London.
Mm.
Did you ever feel a duty or an obligation to be here for mum and dad? If you didn't, that's okay as well.
Would I be heartless if I said I didn't?
No, not at all.
No. I think I feel it all the time.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that's probably what weighs on me the most. Because I think I really, really enjoy London. I enjoy Europe. I could easily just keep living there. Probably not renting for the rest of my life. But
Yeah.
so, but the thing is, it's quite weird because when I'm in London, I really enjoy it. But then when I'm also home here, I really enjoy it as well. So it's kind of like I just have two lives,
Yeah.
like maybe an older male version of Hannah Montana. Like, you know, I can't think of any other dual life. Maybe I could know Superman, but Superman's still in the same place. I don't know. Anyway, maybe we'll edit this bit out.
No, I'm staying.
But yeah, no, so it's like I almost like have a London life,
Yeah.
and I have a Brisbane life, and then sometimes when we go to South Africa, we have South African lives as well because we then slot into family.
And you can, yeah. Then you mentioned like, oh, I can actually stay here. Like, haven't you thought about like ever going back to South Africa and staying there for a bit as well?
I wanted to, yeah, I
Yeah.
considered it after I finished uni, but then I think just it was hard to get a job that made sense to me.
Yeah.
I think upon reflection, maybe that is why I don't typically enjoy going back to South Africa as much. I do. I love the family. I love being there, but as much as potentially traveling elsewhere is because I am just one of 20 something cousins. I am the youngest, and I'm just kind of just another person that slots in.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's just it's the four of us, and then now our family. Whereas it's
Or
us and two kids.
oh, I was like, okay, yes.
Yeah.
I thought you were like forgetting Mark or something.
Or you could look at it as four, as it's just me, mum, dad, and Mark.
Okay. Okay, so now you've forgotten me.
Yeah, cool. You're not here. So. Yeah, so potentially that's a reason why I don't. Well, I don't say I don't like going back. It's why I prefer being here for most of the time. back to mum and dad. I mean, in my experience, and you guys can all attest to it, we argue a lot. We fight with mum and dad and all that. But like, I've always felt that better having them being here with them
Mm.
than the alternative.
Mm.
And thanks for your honesty around that. You're a international man, so every country, every weekend. How have you found then yourself being that chameleon that we spoke of in London now?
In London, well, I mean, London's very, very diverse, and
Yeah.
like people don't really ask questions. Like I think,
They assume you're not from London.
yeah, and even a lot of like English aren't from London either. Like if I look at even my workplace, don't know if maybe less than 10% are born in London.
Yeah. Like Brisbane too.
Yeah, yeah. So
London's basically Brisbane.
yeah, I mean, people just don't bat an eyelid whatsoever. Like some of the outfits that you see people, walking around in, like in Brisbane, they'd either get egged, yelled at, or
Would
something.
have the balls to do it.
Yeah, whereas like people do it, no one even like looks.
Yeah.
So I think as a chameleon, I don't have to be a chameleon. You just are who you are in London.
Have you ever experienced any racism? Like, I mean, yeah, racism in
London.
London? Because I mean, like,
No.
like, are they like I know?
There must. I know there is.
Yeah,
There must be, but I think it's not like to your face.
like during the whole Black Lives Matter, right? Like in America, not they're like, I think there was like more like race crime. I think it was like in New York, but not just towards blacks, but it was like towards the Asians as well. So I guess like London being a big city, like I do wonder. I'm like, oh, are they like race? Like, is there racism like around there? Because I've never lived there, so I wouldn't know. But in Brisbane, I'm like, I think that sometimes I do experience it when I'm outside of, let's say, Sunnybank, where it's predominantly Asian. So I'm just curious to know whether or not you've heard stories, because you do have family friends who grew up there.
Yeah. I think I've definitely heard stories, and not necessarily just towards Asians. I think it's anyone. So there's a term, BAME, so it's black, African, and mixed ethnicity. And so it's just anyone that isn't white. But I think there definitely must be. Not that I've seen it, but I think the other thing is it's not obvious. It's in the way people act or what they're not saying that it's actually that it manifests itself.
And that seems to be the commonality which talking to other Asians is it's not something said, it's not someone getting beaten up, it's the actions.
The body
It's
language.
the body language. Can be just as uncomfortable.
I know. Maybe I've always lived in a bit of like La La Land, even in Brisbane, because
Bubble.
I never really thought of Brisbane. I can't talk about all of Australia, but Brisbane is particularly racist. I've always found that if you speak English relatively well, and you can make yourself understood, and as I think we said in the other podcast, if you're trying to assimilate and trying, that people will accommodate you.
I think particularly in Australia, I've only really lived here, so I can't speak other countries, but that's what I see as well.
And we've got to remember that English is the dominant language in this country, so there's probably an expectation that everyone needs to be able to
Speak
be
it.
confident in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably not good either, but...
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go to North Korea and only speak English, right? I won't get in, but...
You know what's really bad is I go all over Europe and only speak English. I really should try and at least learn hello and goodbye and thank you in whatever the local language is.
But will they appreciate it?
Yeah, they appreciate it, but the thing is everyone understands English.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's a part of their like curriculum to be able to speak English in Europe. So I don't think that it's a big problem for you going there.
Yeah, no, definitely. But then you go to like the Nordic countries and they speak English better than all of us, and you actually forget that's not their home language.
Yeah.
it's normal for someone in Europe to be able to speak 4 or 5 languages.
Yeah.
We struggle
Yeah.
to speak one.
Well, yeah, I'm hard pressed to do Mandarin and barely can say hello in Spanish. So
You know
might as well
Afrikaans,
spend-
don't you?
You just need to drink and then your
Yeah,
language.
your Mandarin's really good. Mandarin.
Spanish.
Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was at our cousin's place in London, and a lot of his friends are Chinese, and I had a bit too many wines thanks to his wife, and he was like, "You," and his other friend who also, well, I think she's Chinese but doesn't really speak it. He's like, honestly, I was like, can you guys just speak in English, because this is hurting my head listening to you to try and communicate in Chinese drunkenly.
Yes. So obviously you've lived in a few different places. Where do you feel most comfortable with? I know you're probably going to say when you're in London, you feel comfortable there. When you're here, it's here. Where have you actually felt most comfortable with?
I'd say Australia and Brisbane, honestly.
Yep.
I think in London, you're still always not a foreigner, but you're like, it's not, like, there's just so many people there. Everyone's passing through. So if you're talking about being rooted and where's home, I'd say Brisbane.
Not Mackay.
I only lived there for 3 years.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something I was just thinking about before. Like, obviously, we've been brothers my whole life. We've really only lived together for like half my life.
Yeah.
Really.
Mm.
Which is kind of funny to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess I moved out of home when you were, what, 12, 13?
Yeah. Yeah, 13, 14. Then we did another 3 or 4 years together. So
Actually, it was quite weird when we first moved in together.
Yeah,
'cause
well,
in my mind, he was like this little 13-year-old, still in like, like just running around hitting his cricket ball with the sock and the cricket bat with the sock and the ball. Yeah, and then you moved to Brisbane. I was like, okay, I can't really treat him like the little kid anymore.
yeah.
Because I guess the only time you guys would have seen each other was when you'd come back home for Christmas, and then even then you're probably
It's like a week or two.
Mm.
and you're probably going there to visit your friends too, right? Like that you haven't seen for a while.
Although you did come, remember you used to come down for concerts?
Training camps and things like that.
Yeah,
concerts,
at the concerts.
I mean, I did see you, but it was never living
Mm.
together. I've only got 2 things left. The one is with mum and dad. So
Mhm.
obviously, no, not going to live forever. Neither will we.
Where are you going with this?
When they pass,
Okay, yes.
and you as the oldest out of us 3,
Mm.
most of the ideas and traditions are going to go with them because we're not surrounded by a larger family. Do you care, or is it something that you think is important for us to try and pass on?
I think it's something for you, me, and Mark to decide what's important and what we take forward.
Mahjong.
Yeah, mahjong.
Like mahjong.
Well, one thing I know is that I'm not big on if our kids call you apak or not.
Yeah,
I personally
I'm
don't
not
care.
that.
As long as they're
I'm not that
respectful.
fast either.
As long as they're respectful to you guys and don't call you Daniel,
Yeah,
then I'm okay.
yeah.
So things like that, I'm not too fussed about.
I also think though that this is my 2 cents, is that it probably wouldn't really matter because you guys wouldn't even know what, like if they were to have kids, you guys would be like, what do they call me now? Like you guys wouldn't even know. That's a problem that we already have with your dad, like with your dad's siblings. Like what do Olivia and Charlie call them? We don't even know.
Yeah.
So that's already a struggle. So
But I mean, we've also even deviated from the beaten path with
100%.
the way we refer to dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
Because we call all the aunts just auntie whatever, and then the uncles, it's like actually a baby term that I'm not going to say. Okay, it's like when we were kids and it just stuck.
okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, all those things were probably going to go, and then we spoke about it briefly before. I mean, unless we marry Chinese women, and wife number 1 who's not Chinese, so I'm out. Potentially, Mark, yourself,
Yeah.
and then that's all probably going to go.
Well, I think it might have been an older generation thing. I'm not really that fussed on the purity of the Chinese blood.
And I guess I'm probably in the same mindset where I'm not actually that fussed.
Yeah.
It sucks because it's a part of us, and it is what makes us who we are. But
Yeah, but you don't lose it. It's still there.
if you don't know it, then it was never there.
Yeah, like what about like Asian traditions that you guys would have, right? So, for example, mum's big thing is like if it's son's birthday, I don't know if it's a tradition or it's just like superstitious thing, but we eat noodles for long life.
Yeah,
Like, is that something that you would like
I
subconsciously
do
on
still
your
do
birthday
it.
you do
Yeah,
it, and then you think, okay, if I have kids, this is something that I actually want to pass on
yeah,
because it's just
yeah,
it's nice to have. It's
yeah.
I think we'll take the things that
Yeah,
are
I think you get
convenient
to pick and choose.
and the
Yeah,
things that make sense.
but
yeah,
I don't even know what would you guys think is a tradition because I'm like, I've known you guys
Things
for
like
so
that. I mean,
long,
yeah,
like,
that's something that we do.
yeah.
and then what
I
else?
still haven't.
Like, is there anything else that you guys can think of? I mean, for me, I'm like, oh, mahjong, that makes you guys so Asian. But that's
I
literally
don't
the only thing
like
that
mirrors
screams
at
at
the
me.
foot of the bed because
Okay.
when my sleeping ghost wakes up and sees itself and
You don't want it to
runs away,
scare, yeah. You don't want,
I just
yeah.
think it's weird to have mirrors in front of the bed anyway.
Okay.
Like even when we were planning this house,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things where mom's like, oh, we can't have this. The door must be whatever. Don't want to get into specifics.
Like,
And we're like, we haven't thought about any of this the way through. Why are we doing this now? So
I think you will probably think you've dropped a lot of the sort of cultural or family things, and then it will be like, oh, but we shouldn't do it this way. And you're like, damn it, I'm actually held on to them more than I think.
yeah, hopefully. Then obviously with our kids and your kids one day, it'll all just dilute. And
Yeah, I think the opportunity is to pick the ones that make sense that we like, and drop the ones that are too tedious or don't make any sense at all.
yeah, I agree. Then my last one then. So looking back at everything,
Mm.
um, what advice would you give yourself? So you've got young Daniel reading a book about airplanes and studying the world map. What would you tell him in terms of this is future, potential future?
I would say I've always been, like you said, a bit of a planner. I wouldn't say I'm like a crazy goals driven person, but I think to younger me, I'd be like, be clear on the goals that you want, and because they have a way of kind of happening.
Yeah,
So if you've put in shit goals, you're gonna have a shit out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've just looked through my life, and like it's just like weird things where I like had thought, oh, this would be something cool, and then it kind of happened. So when we lived in Brisbane, no, sorry, when we lived in Mackay in '99, I remember we went on the City Cat and we went to UQ. It's like, oh, this would be a cool uni to go to. Lo and behold, we moved back to South Africa, then moved back to Australia, but somehow I ended up at UQ. So
damn, didn't know
what
that
I would
story.
say is that, yeah, be careful with what the goals are because they have a weird way of sitting in the back of your mind and actually coming true.
Yep,
And there's like just one experience, like one example of that happening.
yep,
So about putting it out there in the universe, you know.
Yeah, but make sure you're putting the things that you
You
actually,
actually
yeah, because otherwise,
yeah. No, that was cool. Thanks a lot for that. So Alex is just gonna take you through a couple of
All
short
right.
answer questions and
get
Hit
a
me,
rapid
sister.
fire that's not so much rapid fire
not rapid
anymore.
fire anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the first thing that you do in the morning?
The very first thing.
All right, I think I was lying to you the other day. I actually do look at my phone, and then I go into the to pee.
What are you looking for?
WhatsApp, seeing actually if any messages have come from Australia overnight.
Really?
Yeah.
What are you hoping to see or not see?
Photos of your children.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
well.
I'm not
I guess
expecting
that's it.
bad news.
I don't know. I mean, everyone has their own.
If it's bad news, I'd get like a phone call like 5 times in the
Yeah.
middle of the night.
And Daniel always does say, more photos, please.
Well, that's gonna do that because I said this when I answered the other time. Is the first thing I look for is actually the weather, the very first thing, because for me, I want to. It sets up my whole day. What am I gonna wear? What am I gonna feel like eating? What am I potentially gonna do after work? If it's raining, that means my whole mood's gonna change. So
Yeah, maybe I'm too blasé. I don't let the weather affect me. I actually have no idea. Normally, I rely on my manager to tell me what the weather forecast is going to be over the next couple of days, and I forget it anyway. The number of times I've like dressed like it was summer, and I get outside and it's Arctic, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should look at the weather this time.
I'm gonna say pre-kids, it used to be I check the time because now that I have kids, I told Ethan the first thing that I do every morning is I look at the kids because they're in bed with me and I make sure that they're breathing. I don't know. It's just like
No,
I just want to make
I
sure
can
that they're
understand.
okay. And plus, they look so. I don't know. They're just so cute. They're lying in the bed, not making a.
So peaceful when they sleep.
It's so peaceful. So that's like literally the first thing they do. But before kids, it was always I would check the time. And then I'm like, oh crap, depending on what time it is, I get out of bed, do what I have to do. Or if I had time, it'd be like checking the news to see.
I don't think I ever check the news in the morning. What I do check though is actually I look at what time my first meeting is, especially with working from home, because you're like, could I have an extra lie-in? I was like, if my first meeting's at, if you think it's a 9, it's a 9:30. Like, well, I'll sleep until 9:25 then.
And when I say read the news, it's read the headlines. And normally it's like really morbid, like, I'm
Mm.
like, oh, someone's just passed away.
Let's keep going with that.
Anyway, sorry. Unlimited time or unlimited life?
Isn't that the same thing?
Sorry, unlimited money or unlimited I'm really bad at this. Unlimited money.
I think I want to
life.
go with unlimited time because you could have all the time in the world to make the unlimited money if you really wanted to, but you could also then do all those experiences that you need. But actually, realistically, I don't think I want either. But that's a choice of like lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
See, with the unlimited time argument, I'm kind of against it now that I've done this a few times
Mm.
because everything only matters because time is precious, right? So if you have all this time, things actually won't matter.
Yeah, but then
there's no urgency to do stuff. There's no time urgency to get things done.
yeah, but I think I would then like live multiple lives.
You could.
I would think I would like do something really niche that I wouldn't do in my one lifetime, and then and then do something else. So
Oh, it's.
I guess
that's
it
your
depends on where
preference.
you are in life as well. Because for me, I think I chose unlimited life because I'm like, I've got 2 young
Mm.
kids. I feel like not enough
Only
time.
you get unlimited life.
Yeah,
gonna
but
die.
that's exactly that's what I mean. There's not enough time. So of course you'd want to spend all your time with your children. So why wouldn't I? Like anyway,
It's like psychological question.
it's yeah. Physical strength or mental strength.
I think mental strength. I think my answer is going to be similar to one of the other interviewees you had, where if you have the mental strength, then you could probably get the physical strength.
This question needs to be changed. If you only have physical strength or only have mental strength, so you're either a meat, what do they call like a meathead, or you're Stephen Hawking.
I think I'd want to be smarter.
Yeah, I don't think any of our guests actually though have come on to say physical strength.
No, that's why I'm trying to plant the seed.
know.
I have
To
no
get some
need to
different answers.
pull a jumbo jet.
Yeah,
But if you couldn't even walk,
that's not no
Anyway.
no.
so I'm saying anyway.
Giving gifts or receiving gifts.
I think I prefer giving gifts.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely, because I think it's more. I mean, I'm terrible at giving gifts, but I think it's not necessarily gifts itself, but like even like having people over for dinner or doing something, like giving in other ways. I think I prefer that. I actually like I get a bit itchy like if people are giving me things or freebies.
Yeah, please don't give it to me.
But I'm happy to
But
fork
yeah,
out and
yeah.
yeah.
Probably, it's probably a love language thing as well. But anyway, would you be friends with yourself?
So I'm not sure, cause like I don't know if I would like myself.
Like, so you like, are you a shit friend?
No,
or
I just think that I would irritate myself. Like I
'Cause,
think
yeah,
I
like because it's too like the
yeah,
same.
yeah. I actually think I'd end up fighting myself because
Probably.
I'd be besties. Remember how that's mom's answer. She's like, of course I'd be friends with myself. Alright, would you do you prefer to sleep in or have a midday nap?
sleeping.
But you also do like a midday
I do.
nap.
If I can get a midday nap in, I'll do it.
Yeah. If you received an envelope with the date of your death in it, would you open it up? Would you want to know?
No, I really don't like knowing what the future holds. Like fortune tellers, all that sort of stuff. Don't want to know whatsoever. I mean, we all know we're going to die at some point. So, like, is knowing that it's next year or 70 or 50 years' time, should it really change the way you live?
Yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to live in. I think I'd be living in the fear of like, oh crap, and counting down the
Yeah, I
days. I just wouldn't want to. Yeah,
No,
no.
no, but I think there's probably two things with that. Is that you should be doing the things that if you were
Making
to cark it tomorrow, you'd die happy-ish.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you probably need to re-examine what you're doing.
like, I think it's your mentality, right? You should be
Yeah.
living the life that you want to live and live happily.
I think that's the whole
That's the whole
psychology behind it.
If you could have a measuring scale above everyone's head, what would you want it to measure? Like money or happiness?
I think maybe I don't even know what the right word for it is, but like their intentions or like their earnestness, like how honest are they being? But I think it goes beyond honesty, like whether they're being truthful, like are they a good person or are they
Yeah.
a terrible person?
Like
So,
mine was literally a kindness scale.
Yeah,
Like, are
yeah.
they kind? Okay.
I want a balanced scorecard
Yeah.
of kindness and honesty and integrity.
Oh, I was just like, I'm looking for, oh, they're really kind. And if they're like mixed bag, I'm like,
Pretty much, I want to like say like you because it could be useful in so many ways. Like if
Yeah.
you're at a shop, like is this or like if someone's trying to sell you something, like are they being
yeah.
are they being honest? Are they being truthful?
No, it's a good answer.
Yeah.
One of the better ones. And then lastly, what's next for you? Do you have any goals coming up? Anything you're working on that you want to talk about?
But it is New Year's Eve, isn't it? So I
It is.
probably need to work out some goals. Probably
What the-
more travel. Yes, I think we need to see where the year goes. But to be honest, I'm gonna just take each day as it goes.
Well, now that you've got your smart scale, there's probably a few things that couple tweaks. Here and
Yes,
there.
yes. Get the muscle mass up and the fat percentage down. But I mean that's a bit ridiculous to put on a podcast, isn't it? Be like,
Well, actually, now that you're on the podcast, the burning question, I'm sure Dad, I know we said last question, but burning question, this is for Dad. When are you coming home? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What is the right now as of today? What is the time scale?
I honestly don't know. It was meant to be 5 years ago. So,
Yeah.
but also it really depends. I know it sounds really silly, but like where the UK economy goes next year. Like
Mm.
they might have a massive recession and there may not be jobs around and maybe I will have to come crawling back to Australia. But as a backup option, I think it's such a good option. So I'm really not that fussed. Yeah, so to answer Dad's question,
I don't know.
hopefully end of next year. But then it's like shifting goalposts for me because then it's only 1 year to citizenship.
Yep.
Sorry, Dad.
So what I'll try and do is I'll try and come home more often.
But anyway, thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for
I
having
really do appreciate it. And there's a lot of things I think that we both sort of realized and were able to speak about. So it's good.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. I was a bit nervous coming on, but yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thanks for that.